This is how Satan is going to get us, on our pride. This is how he fell. This is how he became hardened. He would not go back on what he did. If there's anything that you can deal with before the time of the end, is pride. I need to deal with it. We all need to deal with our pride. We've got to get rid of that, become disconnected. You know, when somebody has a better idea than I have to come to the place where I'm all in. I want a better idea. We all have to be at that, especially when it comes to truth. Yeshua said, when the Spirit comes, he will guide you into all truth. If someone's being led by the Spirit and they're sharing truth with you, if you reject it, it's very, very dangerous. The law, if we are just talking about the 10 Commandments, have no other gods before me. We can't do that. So is that still intact? Or now, if the law is done away with, can we have other gods before? No, definitely not. How about graven images? Can we make graven images? People say, well, they would never carve anything, you know, a bird or draw a picture. It's an image. It says, in connected with this, it says, and worship them. Now, you're going to have to determine what worshiping a carved image looks like. I have determined it in my mind, so we need to be clear on that. Are we to take his name in vain? What does it mean to take his name? I've heard of a lot of people say, if I hit my thumb with my hammer and I say Jesus really loud, then I'm taking his name in vain. But taking the Lord's name in vain, I do not believe, is using his name by shouting it because you've done something wrong. Now that could very well be part of it. But taking his name in vain is playing the Christian walk when you're not a Christian. You've taken his name for nothing. It doesn't change your life. It doesn't do anything for you. You're just claiming to be one of his followers because it gets you in with the crowd that you hang out with. That's what taking the name of the Lord in vain really is. It's taking it and it means nothing. You're taking it in vain. Can we do that now? Is it legal now in God's eyes to take his name in vain? Would you say? No, absolutely not. How about the Sabbath? The Sabbath, you know, most Christians, they say, well, 9 are okay, but 10, we don't need to keep all 10. And the Sabbath is that one that we don't need to keep. Well, when we understand what the Sabbath was for, it says in Exodus 31:13, it says that God gave the Sabbath so that we would know him who sanctifies us. Now, if that purpose was good enough for ancient Israel, does it make sense to you that it might be good enough for us now? It would be just a carry over if its purpose was for knowing God, our Creator and Redeemer. Then maybe if it was good enough for them, it's probably good enough for us. So their Redeemer is Yeshua. So if the purpose of the Sabbath is knowing their Redeemer, who is both the Father and the Son, I would say it would have double purpose in knowing both of them better. The Sabbath and his appointed times are all connected to the Sabbath as well for the purpose of knowing him. How about honoring your parents? Let me ask some young people. The laws that God gave Moses on the 10 Commandments, one of them says, honor your parents. Is the law honoring your parents done away with? It's not, no. Hearty no. Because that brings anarchy. That's what we see in the streets. You see, the people in the streets in the United States, they are not honoring their Father, which art in heaven. And it brings anarchy. They are not honoring their Father, which art in heaven. And it's bringing anarchy. So when we have it in the smaller things in our home, if we're not honoring our parents in our home, it will bring anarchy in the home. Have you ever, you guys, I know you guys have the perfect home, so it's probably never happened in your house. Well, I'll tell you what, it used to happen in our house a lot. It's a good thing my daughter's not here to defend herself. No. No, if we train up a child in the way that they should go, when they're old, they will not depart. Now, they might have some rocks. They might hit some rocks in the meantime. But when the crunch comes, they're going to remember what we taught them. It's a promise. So be faithful, parents. And sometimes you have to grind it out a little bit. Like, I know you guys have never had to do that. But sometimes you got to grind it out a little bit to drive it home in a very loving way. But yeah, honor your parents. That's not done away with. Of course not. It's not done away with. How about do not murder? Are we allowed to murder now? Not commit adultery. Is it okay to commit adultery now? No, of course not. And these are just obvious things, right? Obvious things. No, it's not all right to commit adultery. How about stealing? How about stealing? No, not stealing. It's not okay to steal. How about bear false witness? Can you lie to people now? No. So is the law done away with? Obviously not. But the law is bigger than the Ten Commandments. It's bigger than the Ten Commandments. How about coveting? So am I allowed to covet my neighbor's goods? No. It would be coveting if you were bitter and I can't have that, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do that. I'm going to cheat on my taxes. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. You see, breaking one of these commandments leads us to breaking other commandments. They're kind of the broad sweep. So if we find ourselves guilty, if we have other gods before Elohim, it's going to lead us to do every one of these things that follow wrong as well. That's where James says, you break one, you break in all. Because one will lead to another. And I find it interesting, having no other gods before me is number 1. And number 10, which is the bookend, don't covet. Don't covet anything. Your neighbor, wife, his goods, nothing. Don't covet. Because if you do those things, you're going to end up stealing, you're going to end up adulterous situation. It's just the landslide keeps coming. So it's really the bookends. No other gods and no coveting, because coveting leads to breaking a lot of these other things. It's amazing how God has done this. But here we go. How about moving landmarks? You see, the law, when it talks about the law of Moses, people say, well, that's just the Torah. That's all these extra things that Moses somehow made up. Have you heard that before? That's the law of Moses. It's the law of Moses because he got it from God, Yeshua actually, and he wrote it down, and it became as the law of Moses. The Ten Commandments were written with what? The finger of God. And I'm not sure, maybe God wrote out the whole Torah up there. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but we know it was written out by Moses. We know Joshua also wrote it out so they could pass it on. But the law of Moses contains more than the Ten Commandments. It's the whole Torah. Now we need the spirit of prophecy, because contained within the Torah, there are laws, I dare say, that are not applicable for us for today. How do I know that? I'll tell you how I know that. I know that through the spirit of prophecy. Because prophecy was fulfilled when Yeshua died on the cross. And prophecy has revealed that he is the Lamb of God. Therefore, I don't need to sacrifice a lamb today to cover for my sins, which the lamb just pointed to the fulfillment of that law. Is this making any sense? So I need the spirit of prophecy again to show me where prophecy was fulfilled and where it wasn't fulfilled and what that actually means. So was the law requiring moving the landmarks? So that's your property markers. Are we now allowed to move property markers wherever we want? We've got large acreage here. I could move those property markers way out, and I could trick a lot of people, because to get a survey of a property like this would cost tens of thousands of dollars probably. Nobody's going to do it. And so the hunters come, and I say, well, our property marker, see that right up on top of that mountain there? That's our property, right up to there, and you can't hunt from there. And that other mountain there, that 10 miles away, that's our property up there. It gets ridiculous, right? No, you can't do that. You can't do that. But moving the property markers, the boundaries. Do you know that there's boundaries of faith as well? There's landmarks in our faith as well. We don't want to start moving those around. I would like to propose is that today, in the faith, people are moving boundaries. They're saying this is a boundary when it's not a boundary. This is not a boundary when it is a boundary. They are messing up the markers, and we don't know where we are anymore in our faith. This is where he came to magnify the law. He came to expand the meaning of the law. This is where Paul talks about in book of Corinthians, I believe, chapter 9, talks about muzzling the ox that treads out the grain. Have you ever read that? And then he makes a comment, and it's just like, where did he get that from? He was talking about sending tithe or sending financial help to those that preach the gospel. He was speaking of himself at that point. He was saying that he is worthy of that. And he says, what's God more concerned about, oxen or people? So Paul was treading out the corn, so to speak, in the seed. He was spreading the gospel seed. And he took it from the animal Torah law, and he extended into the human. There is no Torah law specifically that references that except for what? And you guys probably know what this is. That's the law of the tithe, right? So he was really just expanding, but he pulled in a law that seemed so disconnected. And I've heard people say, that just shows that Paul knew nothing about the Torah using that. You can't do that. No, Paul expanded on what the meaning of the Torah was. How about quarantine laws? Are quarantine laws done away with? Somebody gets really sick or some kind of disease, are quarantine laws done away with? Well, I know some people, some conservatives, that try and declare today with what's going on, I don't have to obey those quarantine laws. I'll tell you what, if we had something that was real serious about what we're going to get into, this COVID thing is just a warm-up. We're going to get some things that actually kill, for the most part. Would it be important to quarantine someone in that case? Absolutely. God's Torah is complete, and it's complete for those at the time of the end. They're going to have to understand the Torah. They're going to have to study the Torah. They're going to have to know how to implement the Torah, and the spirit of prophecy is going to help us with that. How about marrying your aunt? Is it okay to marry your aunt today? If that law is done away with, no, it's not done away with. There might be certain groups that think that they can do that. But as Christians, I don't believe that there are too many, but there are probably some. How about homosexuality or bestiality? Are those done away with? No, they're alive and well. The question is it legal? Right? Yeah, it's still happening. Is it legal according to God's law? I heard and I saw the headlines that said pedophiles, it's the way they were created or the way they are. And it's a form of expression. Well, that's just wonderful, isn't it? We're just giving a license for all of this stuff. So yeah, legally speaking, I understand there's some countries where all this stuff is just fine. It's just fine. Well, this is what happens in the streets when you do away with God's Torah. Now, I'm talking law now, expanded in the Torah. We have seen the Torah laws that aren't contained in the Ten Commandments, but if you actually check it out, you're going to be able to connect some of these with the Ten Commandments. Moving the landmarks. Which one would that be connected to? Stealing. Perfect. So under the header of stealing, you could put that one. How about quarantine? Kill. Wow. That's right. Do you know that in Canada, when my wife came with me, if she infected somebody with COVID, this is the way the law reads, there was $1 million fine. And that's because they reckoned it as she could be killing someone. So yeah, quarantine has to do with killing people. You can kill people if you don't quarantine. How about marrying your aunt? Which one would that fall under? Sure. It would, well, it could come under covet, but more specifically, it's a sexual thing, right? So that would come under the header of sexuality, which would be the primary one. If somebody gets married, then they don't commit adultery, but there's several. Leviticus 18 has a whole list of those type of things. So those would come under that commandment. And how about this one? Polygamy or polyandry? That's having more than one wife or having more than one husband. My wife tells me this morning, I would never want to have more than one husband. I guess the one she has is trouble enough. But there's people that believe that that's perfectly fine. So, in the Bible on a surface read, at least in my mind on a surface read, seems to condone or allow polygamy. I don't know if there's a place in the Bible, I haven't seen one, where there's more than one husband, possibly before the flood or maybe in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not defined there. But definitely polygamy was somehow tolerated by our Father. The question is it something that we should be practicing today? I have to stand up and say no. I have to stand up and say no. We're trying to get back to God's original plan. And his original plan in the Garden of Eden was not that he gave Adam a wife or wives in the Garden of Eden. It doesn't seem to be God's original plan. He's had to work with what he's had in the meantime, and that's the way it is. So the appointed times, are the appointed times done away with when we understand that the appointed times actually come under the header of the Sabbath? There are appointed times to get to know God in an intimate way. We get to know his plan better. The appointed times are actually a condensed prophecy of the whole plan of salvation. They start to take on a whole new meaning when we start to realize that. And it's a time where we get to fellowship with people of like faith. They can come together in holy convocations, just as in ancient Israel. And just as they were to build relationship with God, do you suppose that now that we're under the new covenant, that we don't need to build a relationship with God the way ancient Israel was called to? No. No, I have this idea that he loves us just as much as he loves his ancient people. And he hasn't done away with these appointed times at all. How about the food laws? If we don't eat the right kind of food, what law could this come under? Thou shalt not kill. If we eat the wrong things, we could die prematurely, couldn't we? So when we understand what those laws were for, they were not only to make us a peculiar people because we wouldn't do what everyone else is doing, but in the bottom line, they talk primarily about the health and our well-being. And as we get further back and closer to the Garden of Eden, we're going to find out we're going to get weaned off more things than we're even eating today, because God wants us to get back to the original creation, and we can see what that was at that time. Oh, human waste. That was good. That's the wrong waste. But does he want to get rid of our human waste too? That's good. It's this big. Yeah. Okay. How about the law of getting rid of our human waste as our, we're not going to talk about that. Excrement. Ooh, boy. How about that? When we go out into the bush, you know what? I did a very strange thing yesterday. I did a very strange thing, and I'm not trying to bring conviction on anyone, but I was convicted yesterday. I was out, we were getting ready for some people to come up here, and I was getting the fire pit ready over here, and I was just sort of had it in my mind, I need to keep my eyes open for any dog, doo-doo, because the people around here don't actually leave their excrement all over the place, but dogs do. Anyways, I just finished cleaning up the fire pit area, and I never saw a dog, but there was a brand new dog doo-doo right beside the pit. And I'm going like, man, that thing's brand new. And I'm looking at it. Where was the dog? Because I want to know which dog that was. Anyways, no dog to be found. So I thought, well, obviously I got to go get a shovel, right? So I went and got a shovel, and I used to just walk into the bush like far, like a few hundred or 100 feet or so, and just chuck it, right? Chuck it in not an obvious place, not on a path or whatever. But it went through my mind, you got to bury this. And I thought, no, that's human. It says human. It says when a person does this, not when a dog does this. And it came back to me, no, you need to bury it. Quit arguing with me. Just go bury it. And so I did that. And that, it kind of made me feel good, because that really was the right thing to do. What's the difference between human and dog? Actually, it's my opinion that dog is worse. That's my opinion. Could be wrong. I haven't done a science test on it or a taste test on it or whatever. But anyways, so tell me something. Where do you find in the 10 Commandments the connection? Thou shalt not kill. Disease, right? Disease. As we get closer to the time of the end, disease is going to be rampant. We're told that. Yeshua told us that. Today, we should be taking care of ourselves and our surroundings so that disease doesn't come in. That's being responsible. That's being responsible. We have another one here. Gleaning fields. That's done away with, right? We don't glean fields. You know what gleaning was? You guys probably don't even know what it was. It's such an old commandment. Nobody does it anymore. It's what happened when somebody became destitute and they had no money to buy food or anything. They came to the place where they didn't even have food to put on their table. And they were allowed to glean the field. The people with the fields were not allowed. It's a Torah law that they weren't allowed to glean the corners. It's kind of like, and I'm trying to apply this. Okay, I got a tractor and a fence. I can't get right into the corner with the tractor. I kind of go around the corner. So I'm not allowed to glean that area. That's for the poor. That's just how I related to it. So when they were gleaning, they weren't allowed to go a second time and get the stuff they missed. And I used to pick cherries. And sometimes when people pick cherry trees, they didn't really do a good job. I don't know, has anyone picked cherries before? Maybe a high branch or whatever. That was those things were for the poor. They weren't allowed to go a second time and clean it out. God wanted the poor to be able to have something to eat. But it's interesting, I find, that there was no place in the rich man's garage where the poor could come and get their food. Are you with me? He said, go out into the field and get it. Now, if we follow a story, a very interesting story, we will see two faithful women. Does anyone remember their names? Naomi and Ruth. They were destitute. There was a famine where they were in, I believe it was Moab, and they came back. Naomi brought Ruth back, who was a Moabite, I believe. She brought her back because the Moabites said that my God will be your God, my people will be your people. They came back. She ended up gleaning the field. They had nothing. They gleaned the field, and Ruth became the grandmother, great-grandmother, whatever it is, all the way back to the Messiah. This is the blessing that God has for those that will obey his commands. They didn't come back expecting handouts. They came back and they were following Torah. And this is how God works. If we will follow his ways, do it the way he's prescribed, there are blessings unnumbered that will follow on its heels. This is the blessings and the cursings. Deuteronomy 27:28. This is what he has. When the poor, those people that are destitute, when they get in that field and work they work hard, the guy in the field says, hey, do you have a job? How would you like to have a job? because I see you're gleaning in my fields. You could get a job and get a good wage out of this thing. This is how God takes people from the bottom up. Is this making any sense to anyone? There's no shortcut to righteousness. We've got to go through the system. We've got to go through the system. Gleaning the fields is actually God's method to raise the poor out of their place, to raise them to a higher place. I hope that makes sense to you. When I finally got figured out what this gleaning was all about, it was God's method to make people more industrious, because industrious people are blessed. Has anyone ever seen that? Absolutely, they are blessed. And the poor are walking around. Oh, these people have this, these people have that. Well, why? Because they're industrious. They work hard. They're ambitious. There's nothing wrong with ambition. Can you think of anyone that had lots of possessions in the Bible and wasn't called a friend of God? David, Abraham, I mean, the list just goes on. Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. It just goes on and on and on. It's because these people were faithful. They were diligent. They did what God asked them to do. And it goes right down the line. You may not find yourself to be an Abraham at the end of the day, but if you're a seed of Abraham, you will be blessed. We're told that. We will be blessed in all different regards in our life. Father in heaven, we thank you again for your word that is sure. Father, we ask that you help us to see this clearly. We pray in Yeshua's name. Amen.